Hi, and welcome to my first survival guide video. This time I'm going to be covering basic histology and more specifically epithelium. The idea of a survival guide is that I'll give you only the necessary information or the vital ones to pass. So like it doesn't cram you with a lot of info. So I'll start by explaining the classification and naming of epithelium, and the classification is based on the number of layers. So if we have one layer, it's called simple. If you have more than one layer, it's called stratified. And then after that, you go in and talk about the shape. Now let's start. I'm going to be starting with simple. Okay, for simple, we have simple squamous, and that is if it's a flat-shaped cell with a flat-shaped nucleus. You've got cuboidal, and that is a cube-shaped cell with a circular central nucleus. And there's a columnar with long rectangular cells and oval nuclei. Those are the three main. So squamous for flat, cuboidal for cube, and columnar for rectangular. Then we've got a special type of cell, which is called Pseudostratified Columnar. Just a quick note that the word pseudo means false. So if it's pseudo, it means it looks like something, but it's not. So the pseudostratified columnar looks like it's more than one layer. It looks false stratified. It looks stratified, but it's not. So basically, it's rectangular or long, so it's columnar, but it's pseudostratified because okay, so we call it pseudostratified or false stratified because under the microscope, it looks like it's more than one layer because there are different nuclei levels. So it looks like more than one layer because there are different levels of nucleus. There's a nucleus with some nuclei that are above, some nuclei that are below. So it looks like there's more than one layer, but it's actually only one layer. Okay, now that we've explained the shape, we're gonna go quickly through the functions. For the squamous, since it's flat and very small, it allows diffusion. So it's found in areas where there's a lot of diffusion, like capillaries, blood vessels, alveoli, and so on. For cuboidal, it's mostly secretion, so it's found in glands, like thyroid glands, for example. For columnar, it's for absorption, so you're found in the GIT, mostly in the intestines. The pseudostratified columnar function is to secrete and propel mucus, and it's found in the trachea, or in general in respiratory epithelium. Okay. So now we're gonna go to the stratified. When we say it's stratified, we mean that there's more than one layer. Now, a very important thing to note is when naming stratified cells, we only name it based on the shape of the last cells. So sometimes the cells look cuboidal in the bottom, but in the top, they look something else. And that thing on the top determines what shape or what name it is. So the squamous would look cuboidal at the bottom, but is squamous or flattened at the top, which makes it squamous. Cuboidal, as we already explained. Columnar, it looks columnar at the end. It doesn't have to be columnar at the beginning again. Then we have transitional, which is also a special type. Transitional is dome-shaped, and the thing about it is that it can transition from one shape to another. So it depends on how stretchy the tissue is. So like if it stretches, the domes flatten out, but it doesn't stretch, the domes look more domey. Does that make sense? Or look more prominent. So we go to the functions. For squamous, it's used for protection, and an example of that would be the skin. For cuboidal, again, still secretion, like the salivary glands. Columnar is for absorption, such as the ducts of the salivary glands, where we reabsorb some of the substances that came out with the saliva in the first place. The transitional, since it distends, or since it can get stretched, the function is distension, and it's found in the urinary bladder and also in the urethra. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the specialization of those cells. So when we're talking about those cells, sometimes they have extra features. So one of those is microvilli, and microvilli basically are smaller projections that allow increase in surface area, and they are there for absorption. So since they're there for absorption, you would easily know that they are usually found on columnar cells. The second type is cilia. Cilia is basically hairs, and they're there to propel mucus, and cilia is found mostly in pseudostratified columnar cells because, as I said earlier, their function was to secrete and propel mucus. Cilia can also be found in columnar cells as well, where they can propel other substances. Goblet cells are there to secrete mucus, and so cilia and goblet cells are usually found together, both in the pseudostratified columnar cells. Our second type, there's another type of specialization, which is basically keratin. Keratin is a protein which is found sometimes on stratified squamous cells. So if it's present, we call it keratinized stratified squamous. If it's absent, is non-keratinized. So for the keratinized stratified squamous, it makes the surface rough. So for example, in the skin, so it helps when there's some external substances that are going to act on the surface. For non-keratinized, it's when there isn't that much of a threat, or when there's no need for protection, extra protection. So for example, in the esophagus. Okay, so last but not least, in the epithelium itself, we're talking about the features of epithelium. The first feature is that they have a basement membrane. What we mean by a basement membrane is that line the cells rest on. The basement membrane is made of two things. It's made of the basal lamina, which is the line specifically, and underlying connective tissue. You need to keep in mind that most of epithelium is avascular, which means it has no blood supply. So it takes its blood from the connective tissue lying below the basal lamina. So it takes its blood supply from the basement membrane. So the job or the function of the basement membrane is to support the epithelium. Okay, the second feature about epithelium is that they are connected by cell junctions. We're going to be talking about them. There's 4 types of cell junctions. I'll go really quick through them. The first type is called tight junctions. It's usually found near the apical membrane. So just a quick note, we call the apical membrane the part that's on top, the part that's facing the lumen, and we call the other parts the basolateral membrane, or the basal membrane and the lateral membrane. So this tight junction, or also known as zona occludens, can be found near the apex, and it's very tight. There's zona adherens, also known as belt desmosomes. That's number 2. It's basically formed of a belt that extends throughout the entire cell. There's a difference between that and the desmosome, or the macula adherens, which is just rings which are scattered randomly below those two, and it's not continuous throughout the entire cell. Both of these are known as adhering junctions. Then we have gap junctions, and for gap junctions, they are a complete opening or space between, or communication between, the two cells. It allows exchange of materials between them, and that is pretty much it when it comes to cell junctions. So now that we're done with talking about general epithelium, we'll be talking about glandular epithelium. So when it comes to glandular epithelium, we're going to be talking about the types. Okay, so we're going to classify them. We can classify them by the number of cells, and in that situation, we have multicellular and unicellular. Multicellular, we'll be talking about them unicellular is simply goblet cells, or in other words, the cells that secrete mucus. We can also divide them based on whether they have a duct or not. There's endocrine and exocrine. Endocrine is going to be covered in an own chapter, so it's not part of epithelium. Exocrine is what we're going to be talking about in this video. So when it comes to exocrine glands, we can again classify them based on three things: their product, the mechanism of secretion, and their ducts. I'm going to start talking about the mechanism of secretion. When it comes to mechanism of secretion, we've got merocrine, apocrine, and holocrine. When it comes to merocrine, we secrete the secretion by exocytosis. So we pack them in vesicles and then we secrete them. An example of that is the pancreas. Then we have apocrine. And so when we say apocrine, apo is an apical. So what happens is that the apical membrane or the apical part of the cell degenerates, and that way you release the substance, but the rest of the cell is still intact. And an example of that is in mammary glands. The third type is holocrine, and you can use the word hollow to imagine that it's the whole cell, whole. So what happens is that the whole cell degenerates. An example of that is sebaceous glands. And yeah, next we'll be talking about the products. You've got serous product, mucus product, mixed, or sebaceous. Serous means it has a more watery secretion. Mucus means it has a more mucousy secretion. Mixed is basically when you have both serous and mucus. It's also known as seromucus. And sebaceous is when we're secreting lipids or fats or oils, whatever. Yeah. Then we're going to be talking about the more important classification, which is the classification based on their types of ducts. When it comes to types of ducts, we're going to divide it again by number into simple and compound. Simple have only one duct. Compound have more than one duct, or the duct branches into other ducts. So again, when we say it's a simple, it means it has one duct. So as you can see here, there's only one duct. When we're talking about compound, there's a branch duct, or so like more than one duct. So see, there's 3 ducts which eventually open into one duct. When you call it branch, it means that the cells are branched, not the ducts. So there's still one duct, but their cells are branched. Then we can talk about the shape. There's tubular, so like a tube. Acinar, so it's divided in acini, and acini look like a circle. Then there's coiled, which are basically a type of tubular, but they coil, okay? Okay, now we're going to be talking about the simple. For the simple, there's simple tubular, so it's just a tube and one duct. There's simple branch tubular. It's simple, so it's one duct. It's tubular, so they look like tubes, and it's branched, so the cells themselves are branched. There's more than one tubular cells, but there's not more than one duct. There's coiled tubular, so it's simple. Again, there's one duct, and it's coiled. We've got acinar, and so basically it's an acinar shape, and it's one simple, one duct. Simple branched acinar, there's a simple one duct with a branched cells, branched acini, and not a branched duct. Now we're gonna go to the compound. For compound, we have more than one duct. So this is the first duct, and it splits into more than one duct. Here we've got tubular, so it splits into more than one duct, and on each duct there's a tubular cell. This is acinar. It splits into ducts, and then each of them is acinar. And then this one is tubuloacinar, where it splits, and each of them, some are tubes, some are acini. So it's tubuloacinar. Okay, now I'm going to give you examples of where you can find these or where they're located. Tubular is found in the Simple tubular is found in the intestinal glands. Simple branch tubular is found in the gastric glands. Simple coil tubular is found in the merocrine sweat glands. Simple acinar is found in the penile urethra. A simple branched acinar is found in sebaceous glands. Now we're going to be talking about compound. Compound tubular is found in the Brunner's gland in the duodenum. Compound acinar is found in the pancreas. Compound tubuloacinar is found in salivary glands. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out my Instagram account for more updates. And thank you. Bye.